She had roared louder than any thunderstorm that ever rolled through those mountains. For hours her voice shattered the stillness of the wild, not out of anger or dominance, but out of a raw and trembling desperation only a mother could understand. Deep in the heart of a forest untouched by roads or rescue, her cries carried across valleys and through pine-covered hills. Yet not a single creature stirred to help. Not the birds that once chirped at her passing. Not the humans who had once tracked her movements for study. She was alone in her grief, a mother bear begging the world to spare her child. And for a long time, it seemed no one would answer. But nature has a way of surprising us, and sometimes the most unexpected hearts are the ones that hear those cries the loudest. The river cut through the forest like a blade of glass, its surface wild with snowmelt and ice-fed fury. Towering trees leaned in from the banks as if listening, their branches trembling in the wind, though the real tremor came from below, a sound that didn't belong to the water. Along the jagged edge of a rock-strewn shore, a mother bear moved in frantic circles, her body soaked, her fur clinging to her like sorrow. Her chest heaved with every breath as she let out deep, guttural cries, cries that did not seek to intimidate, but to plead. Just below her, clinging to a slick boulder in the middle of the torrent, her cub fought for breath. The tiny form trembled against the freezing current, too weak to climb, too afraid to let go. The mother tried to reach him. She stepped forward more than once, only to retreat as the current surged. The rocks were cruel and wet, too sharp for footing, too steep for help. Again and again, she called out, her voice echoing through the evergreens like a broken hymn. Her cries traveled far, over moss and pine, past the hidden dens of foxes and the sky-watching hawks, but the forest gave nothing back. No animal came. No human appeared. The only answer was the river, roaring louder as if mocking her grief. She didn't know if her cub could hold on much longer. She didn't know if anyone was listening. She only knew she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not like this. Perched high in the crook of a pine, half swallowed by branches and coated in rain-kissed dust, a wildlife camera blinked its red light every few seconds. Its lens, unblinking and impassive, captured the raw spectacle below in crisp silence. It had been installed months ago to monitor deer migration patterns, not tragedy. But now it bore witness to a far more urgent story. Every desperate cry of the mother bear, every trembling inch of the cub's fading strength was documented in perfect digital clarity. Yet many miles away, in a ranger station cluttered with screens and static reports, no one was watching. The footage streamed live into an empty room, a place where alerts only mattered if they were loud or scheduled. And this was neither. The mother bear's cries pierced the forest in a pattern that should have sounded alarms, if only the right ears had been listening. Occasionally, she would stop pacing and lift her face to the sky, her soaked fur dripping, her mouth opened not in a roar, but in something closer to a prayer. The forest, already hushed from the cold, became quieter still. Even the birds took flight when she cried. Wings beat the air in sudden flurries, as if the sorrow was too much for even the wild to endure. But still nothing changed. The cub, once shifting and whimpering, now barely moved. Its tiny body clung to a single stone that jutted above the rushing surface, but that rock was slowly disappearing. The river had begun to rise, fed by the distant mountains and uncaring skies. Inch by inch, the water climbed. The cub's head lowered, eyes dimmed, and still the camera watched, blind in its silence, recording everything, yet saving nothing. As the last pale light of day drained from the sky, the forest surrendered to night. Shadows deepened between the trees, and the river lost its silvery shimmer, turning dark and unforgiving. Cold mist rose from the surface as the temperature dropped, wrapping everything in a ghostly veil. The cub, once struggling, now barely clung to life. Its tiny body trembled involuntarily, soaked to the bone and nearly submerged. There were no cries now, just weak, shallow breaths that barely disturbed the surface of the water. On the bank, the mother bear lay motionless, her body curved protectively toward the river. She had not moved in hours. Her powerful shoulders, once braced to fight, were now slack with helplessness. Occasionally, her chest lifted and released a hollow moan, deep and fractured, like the last notes of a forgotten song. It was no longer a call for help. It was the beginning of morning, the aching sound of a mother beginning to accept the unbearable. The rain came slowly at first, then harder. It soaked her fur, clung to her face, and slid down her massive frame, blending with the tears she could not shed. Her ears twitched at every splash in the current, but her muscles did not respond. It was not that she didn't want to act. She simply had nothing left to give. Every attempt had failed. Every moment had drained her. Her eyes never left the river. She stared with a haunted stillness, watching the water rise inch by inch around the stone where her cub had once held on. That stone was now nearly gone. The cub's form was hard to see in the rain and darkness, almost as if nature itself was preparing her for the moment when it would disappear completely. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed to soften, unwilling to disturb this quiet, devastating vigil. And in that space between thunder and silence, a mother's hope began to fade, not with rage, not with sound, but with stillness, as if her soul, heavy with grief, had already started to let go. The first light of morning stretched slowly over the treetops, casting a pale gold over the river's dark surface. The rain had passed, leaving behind a landscape slick with dew and eerily quiet. Mist clung low to the water, drifting like breath over the current. Somewhere upriver, the soft hum of an engine broke the stillness, gentle but foreign to this isolated place. A narrow kayak glided into view, slicing through the surface with careful strokes. At its helm sat a woman in a weather-worn jacket, her face calm but focused. Miriam, a forest biologist, had come alone to document seasonal water levels, routine work, quiet work. She was used to solitude. But today, something felt different. As she rounded a bend in the river, her paddle slowed. Her eyes narrowed. Just ahead, something large and unmoving rested along the far bank. It wasn't a fallen log. It wasn't debris. It was the hunched, heavy form of a bear, massive and soaked, its fur matted from the night's rain. Miriam's first instinct was caution. She drifted closer, slowly, watching for signs of aggression. But there was no movement, no warning posture, no charge. The bear was not guarding territory. She was guarding silence. She was grief, made flesh. Drawing nearer, Miriam could see it clearly now. The bear's head was lowered toward the river, her massive frame slumped in quiet defeat. Then, as if sensing her presence, the bear slowly raised her head. Their eyes met, and in that single glance, time seemed to slow. There was no fear in the bear's gaze, no rage, no instinct to protect or warn. There was only something achingly human, a silent, exhausted plea, as if the bear, despite everything wild in her, somehow knew that help had arrived, even if it was too late. Miriam sat still in her kayak, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something else entirely. The weight of that look settled deep inside her. It was not the gaze of an animal meeting a human. It was the gaze of a mother handing her hope to a stranger. Miriam pulled her kayak to the edge of the bank, her boots finding uneasy purchase on the slick stones beneath the waterline. She moved carefully, eyes never leaving the bear. Still, the mother didn't flinch. No growl, no motion. Just a silent presence, drenched and broken, as if life had drained from her bones. Something deeper than science or instinct told Miriam this wasn't a threat. This was surrender. She stepped onto the muddy embankment, scanning the river out of habit. But what she saw stole the breath from her chest. Just downstream, a small, motionless shape clung to a jagged stone barely peeking above the surface. The cub. It was still alive, but only just. Its tiny claws gripped the rock with a frailty that betrayed how long it had been fighting. The water lapped over its back now, tugging at it like a predator waiting for permission. Her pulse surged. No one else was coming. There were no teams, no helicopters, just her. And seconds, not minutes, seconds. She reached into her gear pack, hands trembling as she found the emergency rope. Without thinking, she tied one end around the thick trunk of a nearby tree and looped the other around her waist. Then, without hesitation, she stepped into the water. It hit like ice and stole the breath from her lungs. Her legs screamed against the cold, and the current pushed with relentless force, like a living thing determined to keep her out. She gritted her teeth and pressed forward, digging her heels into the riverbed, inching closer. Each step was a battle, every movement a war against nature. The mother bear never moved. Her eyes locked on the river, but her body stayed rooted, still watching, still hoping, as if afraid her mere movement might tip the balance. Miriam pushed on, the rope straining behind her. She knew there was no room for doubt, no pause for fear. The cub was almost gone. If she turned back now, it would mean surrender. And after everything this mother had endured, after every unanswered cry, that was something Miriam refused to be part of. The water clawed at Miriam's legs as she fought her way forward, each step a struggle against the unforgiving current. Her boots slipped on submerged rocks slick with moss, but her eyes stayed locked on the tiny form ahead. The cub was barely there now, its fur plastered to its shivering frame, its head drooping against the cold stone. Miriam reached out with trembling arms and gently scooped it into her jacket, cradling its soaked body close to her chest. She could feel no warmth, just a faint fluttering heartbeat, slow and fragile. She turned, gripping the rope with one hand as she tried to retrace her path. But the river was no longer patient. It roared against her back, surging with renewed force, as if trying to reclaim what it had nearly taken. The cub's head slipped lower, and Miriam pulled it higher into her jacket, whispering to herself to keep moving. Her foot missed a step, and suddenly she was thrown sideways, her shoulders slamming into the rocks beneath. Pain shot through her, and for a brief moment, panic gripped her lungs. Then her hand found the rope. With every ounce of strength left in her, she pulled herself upright, legs shaking under the weight of exhaustion and the current. Slowly, carefully, she moved, one agonizing step at a time. The embankment came closer. The mother bear, still rooted at the edge, never moved. But her eyes followed every second. When Miriam finally reached the shore, she collapsed onto her knees, gasping, her arms wrapped tightly around the limp cub. She placed it gently on the ground, brushing wet leaves away with shaking fingers. The cub coughed once, a small, broken sound. It moved. The mother bear took a step forward. Then another. She approached slowly, her massive body low to the ground. There was no growl, no threat, just silence and something deeper. She leaned down and pressed her nose to her cub's body. Then, with a trembling exhale, she let out a soft, almost human sound. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't relief. It was a whimper. Raw, quiet, a sound of disbelief, a sound of something she thought she would never feel again. Hope. The forest remained still, as if honoring the fragile peace now settled along the riverbank. Miriam sat just beyond the mother and her cub, her soaked clothes clinging to her skin, her breath slowly returning. Every part of her ached, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Something in her knew this moment wasn't meant to be disturbed. A line had been crossed between species, between fear and faith, and she was now witness to something few ever see and even fewer ever understand. The mother bear curled herself protectively around the cub, her massive body forming a shelter of warmth and reassurance. Her head remained lowered, eyes fixed on the tiny rise and fall of her cub's chest. Time passed unnoticed. The sun crept higher through the trees, spilling light across the rocks and leaves still wet with rain. And then, after what felt like eternity wrapped in stillness, the cub twitched. It shifted just enough to make the mother raise her head. Miriam watched as the bear nudged her baby gently with her snout, the touch both urgent and impossibly tender. A soft cough escaped the cub's throat, then a second, and then a breath, long and trembling. Miriam swallowed hard, emotion rising in her chest. She didn't cry. She just watched, letting the weight of the moment wash over her like the river that had almost stolen it all. The cub, fragile but alive, tried to stand. Its legs wobbled, unsure. The mother bear moved beside it, offering quiet support without force. No sound passed between them. No call. No noise. Only presence. Only love. In that space between life and death, between human and wild, Miriam understood she wasn't just witnessing survival. She was witnessing something older than language. Something sacred. Something profoundly, quietly human. Miriam never thought to check her body camera. After the rescue, after the quiet miracle on the riverbank, she simply returned to her kayak and drifted back downriver in silence. Her thoughts were heavy but calm, her heart still wrapped in the weight of what she had witnessed. At the ranger station, soaked and exhausted, she offloaded her gear and left the footage to upload as it always did, automatically, to a central server rarely checked until the end of the week. But that afternoon, a young technician doing routine file management paused when she noticed an unusually long recording with a flagged motion sequence. She clicked play. What she saw made her sit upright in her chair. There were no words in the video, no narration, just a soaked mother bear crying beside a rising river. Then a woman alone, tying herself to a tree. The ice-cold water, the cub, the struggle, and finally, the moment where mother and child were reunited beneath the forest's hush. She sent it to her supervisor. He sent it to a wildlife organization. Within hours, it spread. Days later, the footage was everywhere. News channels replayed it. Social media flooded with people posting reactions, some stunned into silence, others weeping openly. Conservation pages received thousands of messages from strangers asking how to help. Donations poured in, not just for bear protection, but for all forms of wildlife rescue. The video became more than just a recording. It became a mirror, one that reflected the fragility of life, the resilience of motherhood, and the quiet courage of one woman who didn't wait for someone else to act. In a world full of noise, that silent cry from the wild reached millions, and somehow it made them listen. Weeks passed, and the world moved on, as it always does. The forest returned to its quiet rhythm, and the headlines that had once carried the bear's story began to fade. But for Miriam, the moment had never left. It clung to her, not like a burden, but like something sacred, etched into the core of who she was. One clear morning, she returned to the river. This time, she came on foot, walking through the soft underbrush with steady steps. There was no equipment, no research to conduct, no need for data, only a need to stand once more in the place where everything had changed. The river was calmer now, no longer roaring, but whispering softly as it flowed past the smooth stones. The embankment where she had tied her rope was dry, covered in fallen leaves. She stepped closer to the edge, heart quiet, breath slow. That's when she saw them, prints in the damp soil just beyond the rocks. One was large, unmistakable, a wide, deep paw print pointing toward the trees, and next to it, smaller, lighter, a perfect echo of the first. Mother and cub, gone now but alive, free, together. Miriam stood still, eyes tracing the trail as it disappeared into the green. Emotion rose slowly within her, not like a crashing wave, but like a tide she welcomed. Her chest tightened, then softened. Her eyes filled. She turned and began to walk back through the trees, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. Something had shifted inside her. The forest hadn't just offered her a story. It had offered her proof that even the most desperate cries can be heard. Not all hope is lost to silence. Some calls, even when answered late, still arrive in time. Nature speaks, even when we don't understand the words. Its voice is carried not just in wind or water, but in the quiet moments when survival hangs by a thread and all that remains is hope. The mother bear's cry was never just sorrow. It was a prayer wrapped in instinct, a belief rooted deeper than fear. It was faith, faith that somewhere, someone might hear what the wild was trying to say. And one person did, not because it was her job or her duty, but because her heart recognized something too familiar to ignore. In that moment by the river, boundaries faded. Between species, between fear and courage, between despair and grace. It was a reminder that the world is still capable of compassion, even when it arrives late. Some cries go unanswered, but not all. And sometimes, the right soul arrives just in time. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to our channel for more real stories, where compassion meets the wild. Every view, like, and share helps more people hear the cries that too often go ignored. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never stop believing in second chances.